All right, here's George. I'm very glad you won that fight, Matt, but I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to fight you in the near future.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today I'm going to review Empyre Avengers number 0, which is kind of the kickoff of the big Marvel Empyre Kree Skrull Invasion of Earth event that's coming up here very soon. Obviously, Marvel has a lot invested into this event for a 6-week period. It's gonna be like taking over. I think there's like 30 issues coming out in 6 weeks for this event. It's absolutely enormous. While I personally am not extremely excited about the creative team for Empyre, Al Ewing, Dan Slott as the co-writers on the main story with art by Valerio Schiti, I am interested in some of the creators that are on the peripheral title, some of the special miniseries and tie-ins and stuff like that. I know we got, I think, Chip Zdarsky, Manuel Garcia, Lon Medina, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Ram V, Ariel Olivetti, a lot of creators that I actually think are really high quality. And I was kind of somewhat interested to see what they were going to do, but man, I don't know about after reading this first issue. Empyre Avengers number 0, which is written by Al Ewing with art by Pepe Larraz, colors by Marte Gracia, does not inspire confidence in this event moving forward. I mean, I understand this is providing some backstory, but man, this thing is a slog. It's kind of hard to get through. I actually had to put the comic down a couple of times and find something to do so I wouldn't doze off. This is Snoozefest 2020 right here. I don't know. Probably should have just made this a digital free comic or given this away on Free Comic Book Day to set up the event, because it's not very high quality, at least in my opinion. I know there are people out there that are excited for Empyre, and I've already heard from a couple people on social media that read the comic, thought that it was great. When I tweeted out a picture of Carol Danvers and talked about how bored I was reading this, but we're just going to have to agree to disagree. There ain't a lot going on here. This is a lot of backstory, and the narrative device used to tell the story, which I'm going to get into, I think is highly unentertaining. That's the way I would describe this comic book. This is a highly unentertaining comic book. Not surprising that it's come from Al Ewing. I'm definitely coming to grips that Immortal Hulk was a fluke, or at least the first 20 issues of it. There are a couple issues here and there, but overall, that was great. It was a great comic book. The art from Joe Bennett and Al Ewing's callbacks to old Hulk lore, Double Hulk, Joe Fixon, all that stuff. Really exciting. He caught lightning in a bottle, and that was a one and done. I just haven't read anything from him since that's exciting or interesting. Even Guardians of the Galaxy, I was reading, I read the whole Cates line. I got up to his 2 issues. I was like, nah, I'm going to have to nope out of that one. I did read his Marvel Comics 1000, which was the introduction of the Eternity Mask, into Marvel Comics. I imagine it's going to play in here or somewhere soon. It was supposed to be important, at least that's what Marvel Comics told me. I did read his incoming, thought that was terrible as well. And yeah, like I said, this is not looking good, from my perspective. Obviously, there are people that do like Al Ewing, but just not a very exciting comic book writer, in my opinion. I wish I felt differently, because Immortal Hulk was so great for so long, but some people just have that one run on him, like Greg Pak. Is he ever going to write like another great story besides Planet Hulk? Doesn't look like it. It feels like that time has passed him by, and perhaps the prime of Al Ewing's time has passed him by, and it was only for maybe a year or two. But like I said, this isn't very good. I don't recommend this comic. This is actually pretty bad. But let's kind of get into the details, because there is some good stuff here. Absolutely. And we'll talk about one of the better things first, and it is the art by Pepe Larraz with colors by Marte Gracia. Obviously, Pepe Larraz has been an up-and-coming artist, with Marvel Comics, was part of their Young Guns lineup a couple of years ago, kind of got his first big break in Extermination with Ed Brisson, then obviously got the really big break when he was the artist for House of X with Jonathan Hickman, and last year's blockbuster event series that really brought a lot of people back to comics, for the relaunch of the X-Men. He just did such a great job there. Now, this isn't quite as good as that. Now, the visuals are still very high quality, and he does a good job, but just the setting of the book, it's very dark and dreary, because they're like on the blue side of the moon for the most part. So kind of a muted, duller looking comic book than we're used to him and Marte Gracia providing. But overall, the visuals are really good. And this is absolutely the standout of the comic book. But I will say this. I don't know why they wasted a talent like Pepe Larraz on this comic book. They could get anyone to illustrate this because nothing really happens. It's just filling you in on mostly some backstory with a little bitty bit of information moving you forward towards Empyre. So feels like an enormous waste of Pepe Larraz's talent, especially when you have Valerio Shitty on the actual main title, who really can't hold a candle to Pepe Larraz, in my opinion. Probably if they wanted to sell more comics, they probably should put him on the main title and Valerio Shitty on this one. Hindsight's 2020. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So the art here is good. It's definitely the standout of the comic book. And it's certainly a waste of Pepe Larraz's time to be illustrating a dull, boring book like this, in my opinion. Almost all of the narration of this comic book is provided by Tony Stark from his perspective. The beginning of it is in a dream when he's recalling the Kree's genocide of the Cotati on the blue side of the moon. And this is basically a refresher of how the Kree-Skrull Wars started. The Skrulls went to a planet called Talo. There were two beings there. They're Cotati. They were the Kree. They wanted to offer them a place in their empire, but they didn't want to take them both, so they put them on a remote moon. They gave them very sparse resources and said, we're going to come back in a year and see what you've created. The Kree created an enormous city. The Cotati apparently created a very beautiful garden. They won out. Unfortunately, the Kree were warriors and the Cotati were not, and they were all slaughtered. And that's kind of how we got to the Kree-Skrull War, because the Kree then confiscated some Skrull technology and went to war with them, and they battled for a millennia. So they've been at war for 1,000 years, but not anymore, because apparently they're allies now in the war on Earth. Why is that? Still not sure, but let's try and talk it out. The Avengers receive an SOS from the blue side of the moon. Tony Stark joins up with the team. They head to the blue side of the moon. And then that's kind of where things will get a little weird. There's a lot of religious undertones to this comic book. Lots of talk of sacrilege and baptism. And there's two figures in this comic book that we're going to talk a little bit more in depth on that are both messianic kind of figures. One of them is specifically called a Messiah, in fact. So I don't know why all the religious undertones are in here. Not sure that Al Ewing is a Christian himself or is quite fond of the religion, but he is certainly drawing some inspiration for this story, or at least the verbiage used in the story, from some Christian themes for certain. I gotta say this: the monologue, the narration, whatever you want to call it, from Tony Stark in this comic book is so weird and it's boring and it's so hard to get through. And just look at this page right here. Let me read this to you. This is as they're landing on the blue side of the moon, which is now a plush green with a garden created by the Cotati, who have been there hiding for a while now. We find a clearing large enough for the Quinjet, and I guide us in. Landing a big metal spaceship here feels almost sacrilegious. I feel sacrilegious. I have to hold back the urge to strip off my armor and run naked through the trees. Oh my God, it's so bad. And it's just terrible. And if you're holding out hope that Al Ewing's going to do a bang-up job on the immortal She-Hulk, do not read this comic book, because you will be absolutely turned off. You will not want to read that, because the 4 lines of dialogue that he gives her in the story are all completely ridiculous. She is a mindless caveman and can only speak in 3 and 4 word sentences, and none of them having any type of correct usage as far as English. She just talks like, "What cat mean? Hulk." And, yeah, it's not the same character. Hulk and She-Hulk are not the same person. And from what I had been reading in Avengers, she wasn't being treated exactly as the same as Hulk. So bad take here, really bad dialogue. Just the words from Al Ewing are just bad. Not done very well at all. And there's also the other issue, and we'll get into this, the continuity with Marvel right now. So right now we are in the Iron Man 2020 event. Tony Stark's dead. He's an AI, leading an AI army trying to take over Earth and defeat his brother, Iron Man 2020. But here he is. He's in his armor. He appears to be flesh and bone man, certainly not an AI. Like, what the hell's going on here? Can we not release these at the exact same time? I understand COVID happened, and it probably put some kinks in the process. But I believe they were supposed to come out at the same time anyway, and it's really ridiculous. I just want to say that. But moving on to the 2 messianic characters that we do get in here, they initially battle like a Kree sentry that is there, and a man shows up out of nowhere. The swordsman used to be an Avenger. Of course, he died a long time ago, and I believe when Steve Englehart was on the Avengers, completely different team. And he comes out, he beheads the Sentinel, and they're all happy to see him. And then he starts explaining, because there's a lot of explaining in this comic. That's almost everything that Al Ewing does, is explaining the history and a little bit of what's going forward. And none of it's really all that interesting. But it turns out the swordsman who was going to betray the Avengers couldn't bring himself to do it, fell in battle after he had agreed to sire a son with Mantis. And the Cotati, who decided he was a good man, decided to resurrect him with the spirit of one of their oldest people. Of course, the Cotati are basically just trees. If you didn't know that, they're basically just trees now. They've evolved into tree-like people without faces or arms or anything. They're just trees, people. But they do have telepathic abilities. He is reborn, so he's like half man, half tree, and he's selected to breed with the Celestial Madonna. Turns out that is Mantis. And the swordsman, who is essentially a Cotati in a man suit, but he might be tree too. I'm not really sure about that. I think he might be half man, half tree, half zombie, something like that. He explains that when he was reborn, he was purified of his sins and flaws. So there you go, people. I was not BSing you here. This is a Masonic figure. Obviously, he has been reborn like Jesus in the Bible 3 days later without sin, for all of us, apparently. So he could mate with the Celestial Madonna and they could give birth to the Celestial Messiah. And that, my friends, is the guy in the, I don't know, kind of looks like a turban. I don't know what he's wearing. He is also half plant, half man, and they actually just refer to him as the Messiah, although his name, I believe, is Koi or Sequoia, something like that. I don't speak Cotati. Let's just put it that way. But I believe that's what they call him, and it's not all that interesting. He's not a compelling character. The way he speaks English makes him a hard character to read, and but he's all powerful. He's the Messiah, the Mashiach. And he explains that the Kree and Skrull have bonded together to come and destroy the Cotati that are remaining on the blue side of the moon, because they planted this garden as a reminder of the genocide that happened to them, a millennia ago under Emperor Hulkling. Of course, they don't explain why Emperor Hulkling has come to the throne or why he thinks that now they need to go destroy telepathic tree creatures just because they created a better garden than the Kree created the city 1,000 years ago, which ultimately led to these two civilizations going to war for 1,000 years. Maybe I guess they are blaming the Cotati for that, and they need to come back and exact retribution for the conflict. So they're going to wipe them out on the blue side of the moon. And guess what, folks? The Avengers are the only people that can stop them. Now, my question is, how are the Avengers going to stop the entire Kree and Skrull fleet from destroying them? There's only like 7 of them. Apparently, they are going to try and call an alpha flight, but they think it might be too late, according to the story. Now, there is a good scene here at the end after the baptism of the blue side of the moon happens via Thor. Iron Man steps up and he turns the speakers on in his suit. And Al Ewing wants you to know there are speakers in that Iron Man suit. He tells you twice, and he gives like a big speech to get everybody going that they are going to stand up as the Avengers, and they are going to fight to the death to keep the Cotati safe on the blue side of the moon. And they're going to fight off, apparently, the entirety of the Kree Skrull army. Of course, we know that the Fantastic Four will be joining them. Whether that will be enough, I highly doubt it. Will there be a MacGuffin that they have to use at the end, to save everything? Or maybe an Ex Deus Machina, maybe Franklin Richards will show up fully repowered again to save the day. This seems like they might be outgunned. They might be outnumbered. Their days might be numbered here, people, because I do not think when you look at the entirety of the Kree Skrull army versus the Avengers that they can win, other than, Hulkling being a full-fledged moron and a terrible leader, which might be the case, because I did read some of the, I think he was in Young Avengers that Al Ewing wrote, and he was not a good character. He was kind of stupid. So hopefully he is an inept leader that will fall in battle and cannot lead his people to victory, because the Kree Skrull army will have to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, not to just annihilate and lay waste to the Avengers in this situation. At least that's the way I'm kind of taking it, just looking at it. So that is it, folks. That is my review of Avengers Empyre, the spoiler review, the ultimate Snoozefest, the Snoozefest of the Sench, people. Not a lot happening in this comic book. There's an action scene, which really they only threw in there because they needed an action scene that, Other than that, the reason that Kree Century is there is never explained, other than that they needed to kill it. So the book wouldn't be too boring, although I do think they might have failed on that one. So this is not a very good comic book, at least not in my opinion. You know, if you enjoyed it, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope everyone enjoyed it besides me, because we do need good things going on in the comic industry. We need enthusiasm and buzz, especially for Marvel's Empyre event, which really has seemed to have been an afterthought. I don't think a lot of people were looking forward to this. I know I wasn't, but I did review this just for you. And man, Al Ewing, one-hit wonder. I'm calling it right now. I don't think he's ever going to write a truly memorable story arc again. I think he's going to write some okay stuff, maybe even a good comic book here and there, but I do not think he has another good story in him. And we're not even talking about Dan Slott, who, I don't know, I guess he's doing all right on Fantastic Four. So maybe he'll bring it home. Maybe when we throw some Slott in the mix here, we'll get the mixture that we really needed, and this will actually be exciting, because this is a hopelessly boring, dreadful read, and I do not recommend it to anybody. Like I mentioned earlier, a huge waste of Pepe Larraz's art talent, and I hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly didn't. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews, and don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.